The stranger in the snow. The blizzard howled like a wild beast outside. The wind slammed against the wooden cabin, making the windows rattle. Snow piled up on the doorstep, and the world outside was nothing but a white void. Inside, James Carter sat near the fireplace, sipping a hot cup of coffee. The warmth of the flames was comforting, but the storm outside was relentless. James was used to the cold. After serving in the military for years, he had settled in this remote Alaskan wilderness, away from the chaos of the world. He enjoyed the solitude, the peace, but tonight something felt off. Then he heard it. A faint sound, almost a whisper, carried by the wind. It wasn't the howling of the storm or the cracking of frozen tree branches. It was different, almost like a voice. James frowned and stood up, grabbing his rifle from the wall. He walked toward the door, hesitating for a moment. No one should be out there in this kind of weather. If someone was, they were either lost or in serious trouble. Slowly, he unlatched the door and pushed it open. The freezing wind slammed into him, biting at his skin even through his thick jacket. Snowflakes danced violently in the air, limiting his vision. Then he saw her, a figure, barely standing, struggling through the deep snow. She was covered in frost, her body trembling violently. Her clothes were torn and alien-looking, like nothing James had ever seen before. Her silver skin shimmered faintly under the dim light from the cabin. James' eyes widened. She wasn't human. For a second, he thought he was hallucinating. Maybe the storm was playing tricks on him. But then, she took another weak step forward, and her legs gave out. She collapsed face first into the snow. James didn't think, he acted. He ran towards her, his boots sinking into the snow with every step. When he reached her, he turned her over gently. Her face was delicate, her features sharp yet strangely beautiful. Her lips were a shade of blue. She was freezing to death. Her eyelids fluttered open slightly. Glowing violet eyes met his. She tried to speak, but her voice was barely a whisper. "Shelter. Me." James hesitated. He had seen a lot of strange things in his life. But this was something else. Was she dangerous? Where had she come from? But none of that mattered right now. She was dying, and he wasn't the kind of man to let someone die in front of him. He picked her up in his arms. She was lighter than expected, her body unnaturally cold, as if she had been out there for hours, maybe longer. He carried her inside, kicking the door shut behind him. The warmth of the cabin hit them instantly, but she didn't react. She was barely conscious. James quickly placed her near the fireplace, wrapping her in thick blankets. Her body shivered violently, but at least she was alive. He hurried to the kitchen and heated some water, pouring it into a mug. He returned to her side and lifted her head slightly, pressing the warm cup to her lips. "Drink," he said firmly. She struggled, but managed to take a few sips. A faint color returned to her lips. She blinked up at him, her violet eyes filled with something. Gratitude, fear, maybe both. James sat back, studying her. "You're not from around here." She gave a weak, humorless smile. "You have no idea." A deep silence fell between them. The fire crackled, the wind howled outside, but inside the cabin, another kind of storm was brewing. James had so many questions. Who was she? Where had she come from? Was she alone? And most importantly, what the hell was she running from? She closed her eyes, exhaustion overtaking her, but before she drifted into unconsciousness, she whispered something barely audible. "They're coming." James stiffened. His grip tightened around the rifle in his hands. Whoever they were, he had a feeling that this night was far from over. A fire, a debt, and a mystery. The storm outside showed no signs of stopping. The wind howled like a wounded animal, slamming against the cabin's wooden walls. Snow piled higher outside, sealing the world in an endless white prison. But inside, the crackling fire cast a warm, flickering glow over the small space. James sat in his old wooden chair, sharpening a hunting knife, his eyes never leaving the strange woman wrapped in blankets near the fireplace. He had wrapped her up tightly, trying to stop the violent shivering that racked her slender frame. Steam curled from the cup of hot tea he had left beside her, untouched. He still couldn't believe what he was looking at. The silver skin, the faint bioluminescent glow that pulsed along the veins in her wrists, the alien symbols on her torn clothing, stitched like some forgotten language. The unnatural beauty of her face, sharper than a human's, but still familiar. She wasn't from here. That much was obvious. James wasn't a scientist or an astronaut. He was a man who had spent his life in war zones, learning how to survive, how to fight, how to kill when necessary. And yet, for the first time in a long while, he felt completely out of his depth. He leaned forward, studying her face. She had been unconscious for nearly an hour, her breath slow but steady. He had seen hypothermia before. If she had been human, she would have been dead. But she wasn't human. Her body twitched slightly, and then, without warning, her violet eyes snapped open. James tensed. His fingers inched toward his rifle, which rested against the side of his chair. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. She stared at him, her eyes glowing faintly in the dim firelight. Then she exhaled, a slow, tired breath. "You saved me." James scoffed. "Not sure yet. You might wake up and try to eat me." Her lips twitched into something resembling a smile. "I wouldn't waste my energy." A beat of silence. Then she pushed herself up slightly, her movements stiff, her muscles weak. James noticed the way her fingers trembled, the way she winced when she moved. Even her kind had limits. She reached for the cup of tea and took a slow sip. Her shoulders sagged, some of the tension leaving her body. James leaned back, crossing his arms. "Mind telling me who or what you are?" She lowered the cup, staring into the fire for a long moment before answering. "My name is Kyra. I am, or was, a traveler." James raised an eyebrow. "Traveler?" She hesitated. Then, in a softer voice, she admitted, "My ship crashed." James's fingers drummed against his arm. "A ship? You mean a spaceship?" She nodded. He let out a slow whistle. "Well, that explains a few things." She looked at him sharply. "You don't seem surprised." James shrugged. "After the things I've seen in war, nothing surprises me anymore." He tilted his head. "But you're not telling me everything." Zyra's eyes darkened. She set the cup down and pulled the blanket tighter around herself, as if the warmth wasn't enough. Then, in a whisper, she said, "They're coming." James frowned. "You said that before you passed out. Who's coming?" She swallowed, her glowing fingers gripping the fabric of the blanket. "Hunters. They are chasing me. They won't stop until they find me." James felt something cold settle in his gut. He had been expecting something like this. "Why?" he asked. She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she closed her eyes, as if gathering the strength to explain. Finally, she said, "Because I am the last of my kind." James stilled. Zyra looked up at him, her eyes filled with something ancient and weary. "My people were wiped out. I escaped, but they won't let me go." James exhaled sharply. Great. So not only was she an alien, but she was a fugitive, one that was being hunted by God knows what. And now they were headed straight for his cabin. James rubbed a hand over his face. He had just wanted a quiet life, a peaceful existence away from war and bloodshed. Instead, he had an alien fugitive in his cabin and an unknown threat approaching through the snow. Zyra suddenly shivered violently, clutching her chest. A small gasp of pain escaped her lips. James immediately leaned forward. "Hey, stay with me. What's wrong?" Her breath hitched, and for the first time, James saw something flicker across her features. Fear. "The tracker," she whispered. "They put a tracker in me." James's stomach dropped. He stood up, his pulse suddenly pounding in his ears. He grabbed his rifle, checked the ammunition, and moved toward the door. Through the window, the snow-covered forest stretched in every direction. The storm had started to calm, but something else was moving out there. James could feel it. Something was coming. And they weren't alone anymore. The hunters arrive. James could feel it before he saw it, an eerie presence pressing against his senses, like the quiet before a sniper's shot. The storm had weakened, but the air remained thick with an unnatural stillness, the kind that made his instincts scream. Zara sat against the wall, breathing heavily, her fingers trembling over her chest. The tracker, it's still inside me. James clenched his jaw. How do we remove it? She shook her head, sweat glistening on her silver skin. It's deep inside my body, designed to be undetectable to most scans. They can track me within a radius off. A sudden, high-pitched whine cut through the cabin. James moved before thinking, years of combat reflexes kicking in. He lunged forward, dragging Xyra to the ground just as the window behind them shattered. A metallic dart buried itself into the wooden wall, sizzling as it melted through the surface. They were here. Xyra gasped, eyes widening in panic. James, still crouched over her, reached for his rifle and aimed toward the now broken window. Through the swirling snow outside, dark figures moved between the trees, their glowing red eyes cutting through the night. A second dart hit the side of the cabin, hissing on impact. James pulled Xyra toward the fireplace, flipping the heavy wooden table on its side to create a makeshift barrier. Stay down. Xyra clutched her chest, her breathing ragged. You don't understand. They won't stop. James checked his ammo. Then I won't either. Another loud crack echoed through the air. The front door exploded inward. A towering figure stepped through the smoke, its armor black as obsidian, sleek yet heavily reinforced. Red symbols pulsed across its chest, shifting like liquid fire. Its head was elongated, helmet-like, with two glowing red eyes locked onto Xyra. It wasn't human. James barely had a second to react before the creature lunged. He fired, 2 rounds straight into its center mass. The bullets hit but barely staggered it. The creature twisted unnaturally and slammed into him, knocking James against the cabin wall so hard the air was knocked from his lungs. The rifle clattered to the floor. James gritted his teeth as the creature pressed down, its strength unnatural. Clawed fingers tightened around his throat. Xyra screamed. James, vision darkening, reached toward his belt. His fingers found the handle of his hunting knife. With a sharp, desperate motion, he drove the blade into the alien's side. The creature let out a deep metallic roar, stumbling back. James coughed, gripping his throat as he snatched his rifle from the floor. Without wasting a second, he fired again, this time at its head. The first shot hit its helmet. The second tore through its eye socket. The creature collapsed. But James didn't have time to celebrate. Outside, more red eyes appeared, dozens. The air filled with the deep, rhythmic hum of approaching ships. James exhaled sharply. They'd brought an army. Xyra pushed herself up, wincing. We have to leave. Now. James moved fast, grabbing a heavy backpack filled with supplies. He handed Xyra a spare jacket, though he knew it wouldn't do much for her alien physiology. Then, another sound echoed outside. A low, droning hum, like an engine winding up. James didn't hesitate. He grabbed Xyra's arm and pulled her toward the back door. The moment they stepped outside, a blinding blue light erupted from the sky. A ship, sleek and black, with glowing red lines running along its hull, descended through the storm. It wasn't large, but it was fast. The hunter's craft. The moment it landed, the back hatch hissed open, and 2 more armored figures stepped out. James raised his rifle, but Xyra grabbed his arm. No, don't. If you fight, they will keep coming. James didn't lower his weapon. Then what do you suggest? We invite them in for tea. Xyra's eyes glowed fiercely. No, we run. She grabbed his wrist and moved. James barely had time to register what happened. 1 second, they were in the snow. The next, a pulse of strange energy wrapped around them, and the world blinked. Darkness. Silence. Then, James gasped, his body collapsing onto metal. His vision blurred, his stomach twisted in a way that made him want to throw up. He was no longer in the snow. He was inside a ship. Dim blue lights flickered along the walls. Strange alien symbols glowed softly. A control panel hummed nearby. Zaira stumbled forward, gripping the edge of the console. Her breathing was shaky, her face pale. We made it. Barely. James pushed himself up, rubbing his head. What the hell just happened? Zaira turned to him, her violet eyes filled with urgency. I just used the last of my energy to teleport us to my emergency escape ship. Asterisk, 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 asterisk. But they're still coming. James exhaled, still trying to process what had just happened. His cabin was gone. His quiet life, gone. Now he was on a spaceship, on the run from alien hunters. And somehow he had the feeling that this was only the beginning. A human's defiance. The hum of the ship's engines was a steady vibration beneath James' feet. His breath was still heavy from the sudden jump, his mind struggling to process what had just happened. One moment, he was in his cabin, staring down an alien army. Now he was aboard a spacecraft, fleeing through the dark void of space. Zaira slumped against the control panel, her silver skin glistening with sweat. The teleportation had drained her completely. She barely had the strength to stand. James ran a hand over his face. All right, start talking. Where the hell are we? Zaira blinked, her glowing violet eyes hazy with exhaustion. A secondary vessel. My last escape option. She let out a weak breath. It's small, barely armed, but fast enough to get us away, if we're lucky. James didn't like the sound of that. He had spent too much of his life running from things. He didn't plan to start again now. He took a step toward the control panel, his eyes scanning the alien symbols. He had no clue how to fly a damn spaceship, but that wasn't the problem. The real problem was outside. Through the ship's reinforced windows, the hunter's fleet loomed like a pack of wolves. Their ships were sleek, black, and deadly, marked with the same glowing red symbols that pulsed like burning scars. There were 5 of them, and they were gaining fast. James clenched his jaw. We can't outrun them, can we? Zaira hesitated. Then, softly, she said, No. James exhaled sharply. Then we fight. Zaira's eyes widened. You don't understand. You're human. Your species. Your technology. Nothing about you is made for this kind of battle. James turned to face her, his expression hard. Lady, I don't know what kind of species you think I am, but where I come from, when someone backs us into a corner. He picked up his rifle and cocked it, the sound sharp in the tense air. We don't run. We fight. Zaira stared at him. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then, almost imperceptibly, she smiled. She pressed her hand against the control panel. The alien symbols glowed brighter, and a holographic projection of their ship flickered in front of them. We have one shot, she said. There's an asteroid field nearby. If we navigate through it, we might be able to lose them. James frowned. Might. Zaira exhaled. They're hunters. They're faster, stronger, more advanced. If they catch us, we don't just die. She met his gaze. They take everything. James understood what she meant. The way she said it, she wasn't just talking about herself. These things weren't simple bounty hunters. They were something worse. His grip tightened on the rifle. Then let's make sure they don't catch us. The chase begins. The ship lurched forward, its thrusters roaring as it surged toward the asteroid field ahead. James braced himself against the panel, watching the stars blur past the window. Then the alarms blared. Zaira cursed under her breath. They're locking onto us. James barely had time to react before the first blast hit. The ship shook violently, sparks flying from the walls. James gritted his teeth as he was thrown to the floor. Smoke filled the cabin as warning lights flashed red across the control panel. "They're trying to disable us," Zyra shouted. Her fingers flew across the controls, twisting knobs and pushing glowing runes. James pushed himself up. "Then let's make it harder for them." Zyra glanced at him, then nodded. The ship tilted sharply, diving straight into the asteroid field. Massive chunks of rock spun wildly through space, some as large as mountains, others the size of a car. They tumbled in unpredictable patterns, creating a deadly maze. Behind them, the hunter ships followed, weaving through the asteroids with terrifying precision. "They're still on us," James shouted. Zyra gritted her teeth. "Then hold on." She reached for a control switch and slammed it down. The ship spun violently, rolling between two massive asteroids. The sudden movement threw one of the hunter ships off course. It clipped the edge of a spinning rock, its wing shearing clean off before the ship spiraled into another asteroid, exploding into fire and debris. James let out a sharp breath. One down. Zyra didn't respond. Her focus was absolute. She twisted the ship through the chaos, dodging debris and enemy fire. The remaining 4 hunter ships adjusted quickly, adapting to the unpredictable movements. Then one of them fired again. The blast grazed the side of their ship, sending a violent shockwave through the hull. The lights flickered. James felt the ship lose speed. Zyra's eyes widened. They hit the stabilizer. James didn't know much about ships, but he knew one thing: losing speed meant losing the fight. He grabbed his rifle and turned to her. "Is there a way to repair it?" Zyra hesitated. "There's an access panel in the engine room, but..." "I'm on it." James didn't wait for her to argue. He moved, sprinting toward the back of the ship. Time was running out. The engine room was cramped, steaming, and full of flickering energy pulses. Sparks rained down as the damaged stabilizer whined, struggling to maintain control. James spotted the damaged panel. The thick coil of alien wiring had been severed, crackling with electric arcs. He grabbed a nearby plasma tool, ignoring the heat burning against his fingers. He worked fast, reconnecting the severed coil, his instincts running purely on military training. The ship lurched violently. Another blast. James gritted his teeth. Come on, come on. A final snap, a surge of power, and the stabilizer roared back to life. James didn't wait to celebrate. He turned and sprinted back toward the cockpit. When he arrived, Zyra looked up, her eyes wide with relief. "The stabilizer's back," she said. James smirked. "Told you I wasn't just some backwoods survivalist." Zyra didn't answer. Instead, she pressed her hands against the controls and did something unexpected. She stopped the ship. James' eyes widened. "What the hell are you doing?" She met his gaze. "Trust me." The hunter ships, expecting the chase to continue, overshot their trajectory. Zyra slammed the thrusters in reverse. James barely had time to react before the ship dived beneath them, twisting around, lining up a perfect shot. Zyra pressed a glowing rune on the console, and a blinding pulse of energy erupted from their ship. It wasn't a weapon. It was an EMP burst. The hunter ships froze in mid-flight. Their engines flickered. Their systems shut down. Then, one by one, they plunged into the asteroids, smashing apart like broken toys. Silence. James stared at the wreckage, breathing hard. Zyra exhaled. "Now we run." The ship roared forward, breaking free from the asteroid field, leaving behind the shattered remains of the enemy fleet. James sat back, finally letting himself breathe. Zyra turned to him, her violet eyes intense. "You're not like other humans." James smirked. "And you're not like other aliens." The stars stretched ahead, and for the first time, James realized This was far from over. It was just beginning. The gift she promised. The silence after the battle was almost unsettling. The hum of the ship's engines was the only sound as it cut through the darkness of space, leaving behind the shattered remains of the Hunter fleet. James sat in the co-pilot's seat, catching his breath. His body ached from the impact, his mind still processing what had just happened. He had fought against things he couldn't even comprehend, survived a chase through an asteroid field, and somehow, he was still breathing. Across from him, Tyra sat at the control panel, staring blankly at the stars. Her silver skin was marked with exhaustion, her glowing violet eyes distant. For a long time, neither of them spoke. Then James finally broke the silence. That was intense. Zira exhaled softly. "You don't even realize what you just did." James frowned. "What do you mean?" She turned to him, studying his face. "You fought them." Her voice was quiet but filled with something unreadable. "You fought back against something no human should have been able to stand against." James shrugged. "Well, guess you've never met a stubborn human before." Zira shook her head. "No, it's more than that. You weren't supposed to win. Not against them." There was something in her voice, a hint of awe, maybe even fear. James leaned forward. "You're saying they were stronger, faster?" Zira nodded. "Infinitely. Their kind, those hunters, are built for war. Their technology is centuries ahead of yours. And yet you—" She trailed off, searching for the right words. "You shouldn't have survived." James let that sink in. He had seen them firsthand. Their sheer strength, their armor, their speed. Every logical part of his brain agreed. He should have been dead. And yet here he was. He met her gaze. "Why do I get the feeling you're about to tell me something crazy?" Zira hesitated. Then she took a deep breath. "Because I made you different." James blinked. "What?" She shifted in her seat, placing her hand on the control panel. The dim blue lights in the ship flickered slightly, reacting to her presence. Then, slowly, she turned her glowing hands toward him. "You remember when you saved me?" she asked softly. James nodded. "Yeah, I dragged your frozen body into my cabin and stopped you from dying." Zira gave a small, tired smile. "Yes, but when you did that, I made you a promise." James' mind went back to that night, to the moment she had collapsed in the snow. "Shelter me, and I shall gift you beyond your imagination." James felt a sudden unease. "Wait, you don't mean—" Zira nodded. "Yes, that night, I did something to you." James sat up straighter. His heartbeat quickened. "You did something to me. What the hell does that mean?" Zira reached forward, pressing her hand gently against his chest. Immediately, James felt it. A warmth spread through his body, something deep and powerful, something not human. It wasn't pain, but it wasn't comfortable either. It was an awareness. His breath caught in his throat. "What is this?" Zira withdrew her hand. "A gift," she said simply. James looked down at his hands. They looked normal. He felt normal. But deep inside, something had changed. He swallowed hard. "Explain. Now." Zira sighed. "Your body, your human biology, is impressive. Your species is one of the most adaptable I've ever seen. But humans have limits." James clenched his jaw. "And?" Her violet eyes glowed as she spoke. "I removed those limits." A silence stretched between them. James' fingers twitched. He felt stronger than he had ever felt in his life. His wounds, ones that should have left bruises and pain, were already gone. His reflexes, his awareness, even the way he could feel the hum of the ship's energy beneath his feet, it was all heightened. He wasn't just human anymore. "What did you do to me?" His voice was quiet, but firm. Zira didn't flinch. "I enhanced you. Your strength, your reflexes. your mind. Your body was already powerful for a human, but now, you're something more. James ran a hand through his hair. This was insane. He should have been terrified. He should have been angry. But instead, he felt invincible. Zaira watched him carefully. I did this because you saved me. You had no reason to. You could have left me to die in that storm. But you didn't. James exhaled sharply, rubbing his temples. And what does this mean? That I'm some kind of, what? Superhuman. Zaira hesitated. Not exactly. James narrowed his eyes. Then what? She looked at him, her expression unreadable. You're the first of your kind. A chill ran down James' spine. Zaira leaned forward, lowering her voice. The universe is vast, James. You think humans are alone. That Earth is just a small, unimportant planet. James didn't answer. He had always suspected otherwise. But hearing it like this, from someone who had actually seen the truth, made it real. Zaira continued. Your people, they don't know what's coming. The war, the conflict beyond your world. They aren't ready. James tensed. A war? She nodded. Yes. A war your species won't survive. Not as they are now. James felt the weight of her words settle on his shoulders. So that's what this was about. She had changed him, not just as repayment for saving her, but because she needed him to be something more. James exhaled, running a hand through his hair. So what now? Zaira stood up, stepping closer to him. Now. She tilted her head, a small smile playing at her lips. Now you decide if you want to remain what you were, or become something the universe has never seen before. James clenched his fists. He could feel it, the power inside him, the potential. He was no longer just a man. And for the first time in his life, he had no idea what came next. But he knew one thing. Whatever was coming, he was ready. The awakening. James sat in silence, staring at his hands. They looked the same, rough, calloused from years of survival and war. But beneath the skin, he felt something different, something alive. His entire body thrummed with energy, a power he had never known before. His senses were sharper, his reflexes quicker. He could feel every vibration in the ship's floor, hear the faint humming of the engines, even sense the rhythmic pulse of Zaira's heartbeat across the room. And the strangest part, it felt natural. Zaira watched him carefully. She had been silent for the past few minutes, letting him absorb the truth. Now, she finally spoke. You feel it, don't you? James inhaled slowly. Yeah. I feel stronger, faster. My mind is clearer. He looked up at her. What the hell did you do to me? Zaira took a cautious step forward. I awakened something inside you. Humans are a remarkable species, James, but you're bound by limits. Your biology, your evolution, your very existence. She tapped her fingers against the console, and a holographic projection of a human body flickered to life in midair. James recognized the structure, the muscles, the nervous system, but something was different. Strange golden energy lines ran through the figure, glowing like molten light. Zaira gestured to it. This is what I gave you. James stood up, stepping closer. His heart pounded. Explain. Zaira nodded. Your body is no longer just human. Your strength, your endurance, your mind, they're enhanced. You can heal faster, react quicker. You won't age like other humans. Your reflexes are sharper than anything your species has ever known. James' pulse quickened. You turned me into a damn super soldier. Zaira shook her head. Not a soldier. Something more. The hologram shifted, zooming in on the golden veins running through the body's nervous system. This energy, this connection, doesn't come from me. It comes from you. Zaira met his eyes. I didn't give you something unnatural. I just unlocked what was already inside you. James narrowed his eyes. That's not possible. Zyra smiled. And yet here you are. James clenched his fists. He felt the raw strength beneath his skin, as if every muscle had been reforged into steel. He focused for a second, and suddenly, he could feel everything in the room. The shift in the air when Zyra breathed, the faintest tremor in the ship's structure, the warmth of the stars beyond the hull. He was more aware than he had ever been, and it scared him. James took a slow step back. You didn't just change me. You made me into something that isn't human anymore. Zyra shook her head firmly. No, James, you're still human. Just evolved. James exhaled sharply, pacing across the small room. What if I don't want this? What if I just want to go back to my normal life? Zyra gave him a long look. Then, softly, she asked, do you really think that's an option anymore? James stopped. She continued, stepping closer. The moment you took me in, that night in the snow, you were already in the middle of something bigger than you could ever imagine. Those hunters, they won't stop coming. They will hunt you now, just like they hunted me. James clenched his jaw. He knew she was right. There was no going back. His cabin was gone. His quiet, isolated life. Over. And now he was something else. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was that a small part of him liked it. The strength, the awareness, the power. For the first time in his life, he felt untouchable. He turned to Zyra. So what now? You said there's a war coming. A war humanity isn't ready for. Zyra's expression grew serious. She nodded. Yes, and you're the first of your kind. But if we're going to survive, you can't be the last. James frowned. What does that mean? Zyra hesitated. Then she pulled up another holographic display. This time, it showed Earth. James' breath caught. His home planet spun slowly in the projection, surrounded by stars. Then dozens of red markers appeared, blinking across the solar system. Enemy fleets. Zyra looked at him. They're coming, James. Not just for me. For your planet. James' blood ran cold. Zyra's voice was quiet but firm. Earth doesn't know it yet, but they're standing on the edge of an invasion. Your people don't have the weapons, the technology, or the soldiers to fight what's coming. But you. She stepped closer, her violet eyes glowing. You can be their answer. James stared at the hologram, his mind racing. If this was true, if humanity was truly under threat, then his personal problems, his struggle to accept his own transformation, none of that mattered anymore. Because if he didn't fight, if he didn't use this new power, Earth was doomed. James clenched his fists. No, not his planet, not his people. He wasn't just going to sit back and let this happen. His entire life, he had been a fighter, the survivor, a warrior. Now, for the first time, he had the power to make a difference. He turned to Zyra. How much time do we have? Zyra pressed a button, and the hologram shifted. A countdown appeared. James read it. 30 days. A month. That's all the time he had to prepare. He took a deep breath. Then, finally, he looked at Zyra. Then we better get to work. Zyra smiled. Now you're starting to understand. The ship's engines roared, propelling them toward the unknown. And for the first time, James wasn't afraid. He was ready. The final stand. The countdown had begun. 30 days. That was all the time James had to prepare before they came. The same enemy that had been hunting Zyra, the same force that had wiped out entire civilizations, was now setting its sights on Earth. James sat in the ship's control room, staring at the holographic map of the galaxy. Red markers blinked across the solar system, steadily moving toward his home planet. The invasion was no longer a question of if. It was when. He exhaled sharply, gripping the armrest of his seat. He was the first of his kind, but he couldn't be the last. Zyra entered the room quietly. We need to move. James nodded. Tell me what I have to do. The training begins. The ship had taken them far beyond the reaches of human space. Zyra had activated something hidden deep within her vessel, a training facility unlike anything James had ever seen. The walls were lined with glowing blue panels, shifting between different environments. A dense jungle, an abandoned city, a war-torn battlefield. It was a simulation chamber designed for warriors. But James wasn't just training to be a warrior. He was becoming something more. Zyra circled him, holding a sleek, curved blade. Your body is changing, adapting. You need to learn how to use it. James flexed his fingers. He could already feel it. His strength was growing, his reflexes sharper than ever before. When he had fought the hunters back on Earth, he had relied on instinct. Now he needed control. Zyra tossed the blade toward him. James caught it before his mind even registered the movement. Zyra's lips curled into a small smile. Good. Your reactions are already faster. James flipped the blade in his hand, feeling its perfect weight. So, what's next? Zyra raised her hand. The room around them shifted. The walls disappeared, and suddenly, James was standing in the middle of a vast alien battlefield. The sky was red, the ground cracked and scorched. In the distance, massive figures moved through the smoke. Enemies. Zyra's voice was calm. Survive. Then the figures charge. James didn't have time to think. His body moved on its own, instincts sharper than ever. The first enemy lunged, a towering beast with razor-sharp claws. James sidestepped at the last second, driving the blade deep into its ribcage. The second enemy attacked. James spun. Asterisk, grabbing its arm and twisting. Asterisk, a sickening snap echoed through the air as the creature fell limp. More came. Faster. Stronger. James didn't slow down. He moved like a ghost, weaving through attacks, his enhanced senses guiding him. Every strike was precise, every movement lethal. By the time the simulation ended, the battlefield was littered with fallen enemies. James stood in the center, breath steady, heart pounding. Zyra watched him with something new in her eyes. Respect. You're ready, she said. James rolled his shoulders, wiping the sweat from his brow. Not yet, but I will be. The return to Earth. The final day came faster than James expected. Standing in the ship's armory, he examined the sleek alien armor Zyra had given him. It wasn't bulky like human military gear. It was form-fitting, lightweight, yet stronger than any metal he had ever seen. The moment he put it on, it adjusted to his body, sensing with his new abilities. Zyra handed him a weapon, a rifle unlike anything he had seen before. This is designed for you. Your reflexes, your strength. It won't slow you down. James took the rifle, feeling the energy humming inside it. Then, Zyra placed a small device in his palm. A communicator. So you don't fight alone. James frowned. Who am I supposed to call? Zyra's expression hardened. Your people. James exhaled. That was the final piece, wasn't it? Earth didn't know what was coming. They had no idea they were already being hunted. It was time to change that. The ship's engines roared to life, breaking into Earth's atmosphere. James was going home. The first contact. Earth's military base in the Nevada desert was one of the most secure locations on the planet. At least, it was supposed to be. James walked through the heavily guarded facility, as if it were a playground. The soldiers never saw him coming. His enhanced speed and stealth let him slip past security like a shadow. Finally, he entered the main command center. The generals were already there, arguing over satellite reports, strange anomalies in space, missing scout ships. They knew something was wrong. They just didn't know what. James stepped forward. The moment they saw him, guns were drawn. Identify yourself. A soldier barked. James raised his hands, keeping his voice calm. Relax. I'm one of yours. The highest-ranking general, A grizzled man with decades of experience narrowed his eyes. "I don't know who the hell you are, son, but you better start talking." James took a deep breath. "You don't know me, but you're about to. And if you don't listen, your world won't be here much longer." Silence filled the room. James activated the holographic map Zyra had given him. The invasion markers appeared, red, blinking warnings that stretched across the solar system. Gasps filled the room. The general's face hardened. "What the hell is this?" James met his gaze. "Proof." A long pause. Then, finally, the general nodded. "All right. Talk. The final war begins." The following hours were a blur of strategy, arguments, and hard decisions. Earth wasn't ready. The military didn't have the technology or firepower to fight what was coming. But they had James, and James had a plan. He stood at the center of the war table, pointing to key locations across the globe. "We have one advantage: the element of surprise. They don't know that we know they're coming." The general folded his arms. "And what do you suggest?" James looked at the room full of military leaders, scientists, and soldiers. He saw fear in their eyes. And he understood. They had lived their whole lives thinking they were the dominant species, that Earth was untouchable. Now, that illusion was shattered. James leaned forward, his enhanced mind already calculating every move, every possible outcome. "We hit them first." The room fell silent. James straightened. "We use every resource we have. We push human technology beyond its limits. And we prepare." The general watched him carefully. "And what about you? What's your role in this?" James smirked. "I lead the fight." Final scene. The warship awakens. Days later, James stood on the deck of Earth's first interstellar warship. It wasn't much. It wasn't advanced. But it was human. Built with everything Earth had to offer, using the stolen blueprints from Zyra's ship. It was a symbol. The fight was coming. The invasion was near. But for the first time in history, humanity wasn't just reacting. They were fighting back. James turned to Zyra. "Think they'll be surprised?" Zyra smiled. "Oh, they have no idea." James clenched his fists, staring at the vastness of space. The enemy was out there, coming for them. But humanity was ready. And this time, they weren't running. They were hunting.